Okay, lots to like about spring. Looking forward to gardening.
T-ball.
Colors other than brown or gray. For sure. Okay, well, let's get rolling. Keep thinking your spring thoughts of crocuses and daffodils. I like it. Again, I'm Christy Callahan from Innovative Projects at Clinton County RESA, just welcoming you, and we'll get rolling. On our agenda today, we have some early on updates. We'll feature some information about OSEP monitoring at MDE, determinations, and the early on application. We'll have some updates from preschool special education, a little bit of a conversation about family rights, procedural safeguards, and dispute resolution, and then some updates from our own Office of Innovative Projects regarding public awareness, child find, and professional learning. So we'll get rolling.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Janet Timms with the Office of Great Start, and we just wanted to cover a few, give you a quick update about where we are with our OSEP monitoring. As you know, Michigan is one of 3 states right now that's being monitored by OSEP. We have started the process. We have what they're looking at is 8 components of general supervision. And those of you that work in Part B have probably heard this already. But they're looking at fiscal management, data systems, integrated monitoring, sustained compliance and improvement, dispute resolution, and then professional development, policies, procedures, state performance plan, all of those things. So that last bullet, they're embedded into the other components. So they don't specifically have time dedicated to just that. Next slide, please. So the differentiated monitoring that OSEP is conducting right now is rolled out in 3 phases. So the first phase is where they request documents and information. We've been having monthly calls with OSEP and just reviewing policies, procedures, practices, answering questions. They have a whole set of overarching questions that we've been answering and responding to. And then phase 2 will be an on-site. Actually, what we're going to have is part of the time will be on-site and part of the time will be virtual. And that's going to happen in May. And that will be a deeper review of implementation of policies, procedures, practices. This is when we'll be able to demonstrate to them some of the things that we're doing. And then phase 3 would be the closeout, letters of findings, and corrective action. So it's really kind of, in some ways, it's similar when we come in, we do monitoring where we want to see the documentation, we ask questions, and then we do the follow-up and close out. So that's the general format for that. Next slide. So December kicked off phase 1 for us, and that's when we had to, just before Christmas, we had to have all of our documentation uploaded and sent to OSEP. In January, we started having conversations with OSEP. We had monthly calls, a set of 3 calls for each month, and each month targeted a specific protocol. January, we looked at data systems, February, dispute resolution, March, integrated monitoring, and then we just this week finished up our sustained compliance and improvement. So that this week concluded phase 1. In May, that will begin phase 2, and that's 4 days of on-site, 2 days of virtual meetings. There will be stakeholder input, but we still don't have an agenda for what that's going to look like or who exactly they want to talk to. We may be reaching out to some ISDs, letting you know that they would like that the team from OSEP would like to speak to you. And basically, at what they would be looking for is, how is the state supporting you in keeping compliant with IDEA and making those improved outcomes. And then in September, that's when they will have their report finished. We should get our letter of either findings or no findings at that point. If we have any findings, then we'll have to begin our corrective action process. So that's pretty much where we are right now. The monitoring so far seems to be going well. We've been able to actually cut short some of our meetings because we've answered all their questions. And I think they're pretty satisfied with what we've been showing them and telling them. But we won't really know until September when we find out if we have any findings. So that's just a quick update of where we're at so that you have an idea of what OSEP's looking at and where we are in that process. So thank you. Next slide. Okay, Mark, this is yours.
All right. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Hypers, and I am out of the Office of Innovative Projects as well. I think I know many of you on this call. I'm pinch hitting for Lisa today. So just a couple things we want to bring to your attention. You may know about some of these already. One is just a reminder about contingency learning plans. So the MDE sent out a memo on this, reminding us that these are still a thing, and they are recommending that we use them. They are not to be part of the IEP, but mentioned on the IEP and supplementary aids and supports. So there's guidance with that as well that the OS put out. There's actually new guidance. So if you have the old guidance, look for the new guidance that is in, it's dated March 2022. And if it gives you any sort of comfort at all, just know that this guidance was considered to be so good that LRP actually asked to be able to use it nationwide. So look for that updated guidance. The link that is actually in the memo is to the old guidance. So that's why we're giving you the new guidance. And I think that'll be helpful to you as well. So we'll give you a couple of bullet points there as well. We told you where it has to be noted, and it's developed in conversation with parents. Right? It's kind of a proactive thing for, hopefully we're not going to have to use these as much as we have in the past, if at all, but we want you to be prepared. The other thing that we want to bring to your attention, and hopefully you have heard about this already, is the Preschool Inclusion Collective Action Plan. And at this point, we have a core implementation team that is really digging into this much deeper. And maybe you've heard about this at some conference recently, but we would really appreciate if you would download the collective action plan, take a look at it. We're to the point now of looking at the 7 actions that we believe are part of a system that supports preschool inclusion. And as we work through those, we're not going to work through them sequentially. We're going to work through them in a way that says, it's time to work on this one, and we'd invite you into that work. So that's how we envision it happening at this point, that we're not going to go through those sequentially, but we're going to say, where can we work now? Who would like to be part of this? And you actually have an option to say, I'd like to be part of that work. I'd like to be just kept informed of that work. But we really know that this is systems work. And at this point, the core implementation team is really looking at how do we eat an elephant? And we're trying to do that one bite at a time. So I'm very encouraged by this plan and the work that's been put into it, because I think it's very thoughtful. I think it's laid out in a way that we truly can see differences for children in terms of inclusion. So you have the link there. Take a few minutes. You'll see that the 7 action steps, or they're not steps, 7 actions are actually toward the back or the end of the document itself. So look for those, but you can also look at the whole document and know that that was developed from stakeholders across the state as well. All right. So I will leave you with that and turn it back over to Early On to talk about determinations.
Okay, so that's me again. Next slide, please. Just a reminder that as we get closer to May, in the May release in Catamaran, each of the local service areas will be getting their determination. And again, the areas that, the assigned levels of determination are meets requirements, needs assistance, or needs intervention. And so we have the criteria listed here for meets requirements. Your indicators 1, 7, 8, which are data indicators, are at 90% or greater. There's no corrective action plan that's in the uncorrected non-compliance status. Then you would meet requirements. For needs assistance, if any of the data indicators 1, 7, or 8 are below 90%, or any indicator with no data reported, or any cap in a second year. So basically, if you have an uncorrected noncompliance or an UNC, you would fall into the needs assistance. for needs intervention, any corrective action plan beyond 2 years from issuance. So if you're in your second year of an uncorrected noncompliance or longer, you would fall into needs intervention. And if the determination level of needs assistance, if you've received needs assistance for 4 years, you're going to be in needs intervention. So that's the criteria for each of these determination levels. And we just want to kind of alert you. I know we've kind of talked about it in the past that at some point we wanted to start including some of the results indicators into our determination plan. And so next year May of 2023, we are looking at including child outcomes reporting rate to be factored into our determination criteria. And the reason we are looking at that one specifically is because as a state, that's one of the areas that when OSEP gives up, like last year when OSEP gave us our determinations, this was an area that was really low. And so we want to make sure that we start really targeting child outcomes reporting rate and making sure that we have complete data so that when a child enters the program and exits the program, that we're reporting those outcomes at both timeframes. Any questions about that? Or Colleen, is there anything I missed?
Great job.
Okay. Just another reminder, the new federal grants will be opening up soon. Early On opens May 1st and is due July 1st. Preschool flow through opens up May 1st and is due June 1st. And so now we want to talk a little bit about family rights, procedural safeguards, and dispute resolution. So Barb is going to kick us off on this. So Barb, it's up to you.
All right, thanks, Janet. Good morning, everybody. I'm Barb Schinderly, and for this section, I'll be joined by Janet, Laura, and Mark to share information about family rights, procedural safeguards, and dispute resolution. And we'll be discussing family rights and protections aligned with IDEA requirements for both early on and preschool special education. So it is important for families to know their rights for so many reasons. They can advocate and make the best decisions for their child if they know their rights. This is a picture of my daughter Megan, and this is when she was 3 years old and had just transitioned out of early on. And I just wanted to share a little bit of a personal story about how knowing my rights really made a difference for my daughter and our family. So when Megan was in early on, we had a really positive experience with early on. Our whole family did better because of early on. I developed really close relationships with our service providers. I felt supported. Megan thrived. She is hearing impaired and had a trach for the first 2 years of her life. So she learned to sign over 100 words through our providers and early on teaching her and our family how to sign. And my son, who was 17 months old at the time, loved playing with the service providers when they came to the house each week to provide services in our natural environment. And when it came time for Megan to transition out of early on, the environment where she would be continuing to receive services became really important, and we discussed different options. At the time, we decided to place her in a special education classroom, even though her only need was speech. It seemed like a good idea because she could ride the bus, it picked her up at the house, it was free. But once Megan attended the preschool special education classroom, we realized there were no other little girls in the class, and none of the other children had any spoken language. And since she was going there just really for speech, she wasn't going to be learning from her peers how to speak, better. So after 2 days, we knew it was not the right placement for Megan, and she didn't like it. So I knew my rights, and I knew that I could request a new IEP meeting to change the placement, even though I am such a people pleaser, I felt bad to have to call another IEP meeting because I knew everybody was busy, but I knew it would be the best thing for Megan. So we had another IEP meeting and changed the placement so that Megan attended the same preschool as her big brother. It wasn't free, but at the time we felt it was the best option. And, you know, over the years, Megan is 30 now, so this is a really old picture.
Oh.
I've reflected back on this decision so many times, and it was one of the top 5 most important decisions I ever made in my whole life. By putting Megan in an educational environment that was the least restrictive, it put her on a path for full inclusion throughout her life. And if I hadn't known my rights, I probably would have just stuck it out with the special education classroom. But then her life could have been so different. She was fully included in school, beginning in preschool, and she graduated and went on to earn her master's degree in social work. So I want this for all families. I want all families to know their rights so that they can make the best decisions for their child as well. And then the next slide talks about, so how do we know that families know their rights? One way we know is we measure this. We have 2 ways of measuring whether families know their rights. And for early on, we measure through the family survey. And for preschool education, it's also a family survey. So for early on, we measure, do families know their rights? Can they effectively communicate their children's needs? And are they able to help their children develop and learn? And through Preschool Special Education Indicator 8 of the APR measures the % of parents who report that schools facilitated parent involvement as a means of improving services and results for children with disabilities. Both of these data from the surveys are reported to OSEP every year through our SPP APR. And then on the next slide, I just wanted to point out that some of the rights are similar between early on and preschool special education. You can see here some of them. I won't read through the whole slide, but environments, which was really important to us. Early on focuses on providing services in the natural environment, and preschool special education is the least restrictive environment. Both of them involve receiving information in the family's native language, having an evaluation with parent consent, participating on the IEP or IFSP, the right to review records, the right to confidentiality, prior written notice, and dispute resolution. And so at this time, I'm just thinking I'd like to pause and ask people that are on the call if they would like to share how you ensure families know their rights, and if you have any stories about how you've supported families in this area. You can unmute if you have anything you'd like to share, or you can use the chat feature if you'd like to do that. So we'll just pause for a moment. I'm not sure if anybody's, I can't see if anybody's putting anything in chat. Oh, we check here. Or if anybody wants to unmute. If not, that's okay too. We can move on. I just wanted to give space for it. Oh, here's somebody. Transition planning includes visits to several sites, Head Start, ECSE, tuition, preschool. Oh, I love that. Yep, that's really important that families can know that, you know, there are options. It's just not one size fits all. Oh, thanks, Carrie. You've heard bits of it before, but this was a piece that really, when I think back, it was just such a huge part of our story. All right, thank you.
Barb, you know, I'll share something. Even though it's been a while since I was principal of the Millet Learning Center, but one of the things, you know, we worked closely with our early on folks across the county. So when they would come to the Millet Center, you know, typically these are children with more significant needs that would be going to the center program at age 3, you know, at that transition period. And, you know, parents were afraid. Parents were, you know, really nervous about letting go of their child. putting them on a bus, sending them across the county to go to this program. So I would sit, we would show them the program, we would show them the classrooms. I would sit with them. So whether it was at the IF or at the IEP, or, if they came in prior to that, I would sit with them with the procedural safeguards document, the big procedural safeguards document, and I would go through it with them. And I know they were overwhelmed, but still I would, talk about the different rights, let them know that they have options, and that if they had any questions, they could always call me. And even if we were on opposite ends of the argument, and we weren't agreeing, it was still my job to help them move forward. So if they wanted to file a complaint, or if they wanted to request a new IEP, it was my job to help them do that. And that built trust and built that relationship right off the bat, so that they could start feeling better about sending their child to the program. So that's how we would do it when I was still at the center program.
That's really great, Janet. You're such a strong supporter of all families. You see it from both sides, and no wonder you're so perfect in this role. Thank you.
Stop it.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. In the chat, appreciate honoring parents' perspectives. Yep, it's really, really so great that we all have mutual purpose. Parents, providers, administrators, just that the child does their best and has the best possible outcomes. So thank you.
Hey, Barb, Victoria has her hand raised.
Oh, hi, Victoria.
Hi, I just wanted to mention that I know as early on providers and service coordinators, you all have so much data to collect and so much work to do that sometimes those conversations can seem hard to fit into your schedule. And so that's why Michigan Alliance for Families is here to support you in doing just this. We work with our policy coordinator to learn all of the laws and their parents' rights around the procedural safeguards. And we explain them, and we can mentor them one-on-one in great detail of what those things mean to be able to be better collaborators with the team.
Thank you. So important. Thank you so much, Victoria.
Thank you.
Good reminder for everybody. All right. Well, thanks everybody for sharing, and I will turn it over to Laura, who's going to talk about procedural safeguards next a little bit more.
Thank you, Barb. Good morning, everyone. I'm Laura Goldthwait with Early On at the Michigan Department of Ed. And again, thank you, Barb, for sharing information about family rights. And just to take a minute, a reminder that each of those family rights are connected to responsibilities we have in providing early intervention and preschool special education. So these are all required by law, and we must ensure that they are met, such as Barb mentioned, providing services in the natural environment or least restrictive environment to the maximum extent possible, adhering to timelines around the IFSP and the IEP, and again, engaging families in the process. There are other pieces, I just wanted to point those out. So thank you all for making that happen. We know it's not easy, and sometimes it can feel like a lot of paperwork. But we want to shift that mindset so that we think about, as Janet mentioned, that this is an opportunity to build trust with families so that they know our entire system is set up to support them and their child, and that we have safeguards in place, procedural safeguards in place to protect their rights. So a reminder, we are responsible for providing and reviewing these procedural safeguards with families. And so just in chat, as we go through this, if you can think about times when you've shared and discussed procedural safeguards with families, think about what process works best. These are some of the questions that I would like to kind of get a sense of from the field. So what process works best when you are sharing this information with families? If you have a trick, something that works for you, that families have been really receptive about looking at their procedural safeguards. I know Janet mentioned sitting with a family and going through it and really focusing on their choices. So whatever process you have with sharing information, if you also, if you want to answer a question about how you support families, if their native language is something other than English, we would really like to hear that. So if you'd like to add that to chat, it just helps us understand some ways that you are working in the field that are supportive. And then that way we have a sense of how that's working and it can help guide us in our practice. So, or if someone wants to unmute and share your process with sharing procedural safeguards or working with families where their native language is different.
I wouldn't mind sharing, Laura from Gresham Isabella RESD.
Thanks, Leanne. Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So I would say we struggle with the native language part. All of a sudden, that usually isn't an issue, but all of a sudden this year that has been. However, with the procedural safeguards or families' rights, I don't know, several years ago with that family survey had really made a plan as a group for targeting some different things, and family rights was one of them. And so every time my folks do a periodic review or an IFSP, they specifically have to go through that, what is that called? The Early On book. All of a sudden my mind is like, oh, you know,
That's
the
guidebook.
guidebook. Yes.
Yeah, Leanne.
And they have to, you know, to go through that, depending on what's relevant, but they always have to go through the family rights section of that and explain in layman terms what exactly that means, knowing their families. Some of our families are professors, so they very easily can just read it the way it is and, you know, and talk about that. But for other folks, they kind of break it down in a way that they feel that they can understand. And we had really positive results, you know, when we get our family survey results back. We saw a big change a few years ago with that once I required that they started doing that. And so it is something, though, that I have to kind of keep track of because those kinds of things can kind of go by the wayside. So, you know, as I'm actually transitioning to a new position this year, but that will be this coming year. I'm going to be the director of special ed, but
congratulations.
Thank you. But that is something that I will pass on to the person coming into this position, because I feel like that is really important, especially, it is really important in Early On, but where I find, and I don't know what everyone else thinks, we also do 3 to 5 at our ISD, you know, so we kind of continue on with that group. Where I see the biggest struggle for our families is when they're moving into kindergarten or into the K-12, because, you know, I think for everyone, doesn't matter what kind of a preschool you're in, that's a big transition because you don't have the same relationship with the teacher or the school. You know, it's just different going from little kids to all of a sudden you're big when you're 5. Our parents really struggle with the how much more impersonal it is, but also, even though they understand their rights, the feelings that they're not heard like they were in preschool and in Early On, and that how that partnership changes, there's that shift to that. Even though we make an offer of FAPE in preschool, it just feels much more rigid once they get to kindergarten. And so our discussions this year, coming up in our PLCs, are going to be about how can we help parents, number one, that we can be transparent about that shift and what we've heard from other parents, you know, of how that feels, but also to, you know, empower them to still be a part of that team, even though it seems different. So we're going to start having discussions about that and working on that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing. And again, congratulations on your new position.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I see some different things in the chat. I would recommend people take a look at those. Also, and there's a lot of thanks for sharing, Leanne. I know it's always hard to come on, but we appreciate what you shared and look forward to hearing the work of your PLCs in supporting the transition from preschool education into kindergarten, another important transition for families in general, and especially for families with children with special needs. So as we continue our conversation today, it's important to note that procedural safeguards for children with IFSPs in Early On, including those who have Michigan mandatory special education birth to 3. So any child with an IFSP, there's different procedural safeguards than there are for children with IEPs in preschool special education. So we're going to go into a couple of slides here, but just to note, children with IFSPs, and this is the easiest way to kind of separate these. If they have an IFSP, we use the Early On procedural safeguards. If they have an IEP, we use the Part B procedural safeguards. So it's important to make sure that in your system, you are making that delineation. And if you have any links that you give to parents, that they're linked to the correct document. So, and just to note, we do both. We use the same dispute resolution system, both for children with IFSPs and IEPs. So that part is the same in the procedural safeguards, but there are some differences in the rest of the document. So if we can advance to the next slide. There are a lot of forms on here. You will have access to this PowerPoint presentation, but these are, we're going to talk about Early On first, and then I'm going to turn it over in the next slide for Mark to talk about procedural safeguards for preschool special education. So these documents on this slide are all designed to be used with families with children with IFSPs, again, including Michigan Mandatory Special Education, to support their rights. So when you give Early On, there's different times that you're required to give Early On procedural safeguards to families, and we want to talk about that for a moment. So Part C of IDEA contains the requirement that we provide notice to families of certain rights and procedural safeguards upon referral. So we require that families are informed of these procedural safeguards within 10 days of the referral. And the Early On Michigan Family Rights Brochure, some people call it the trifold, is a document designed to inform families of these rights and provide a brief description of their procedural safeguards at that time of referral. This document can easily be sent to families with a letter or email informing them of their referral and to welcome them to Early On. So we do see that a lot of people, because it's an easy fold, trifold, it can go in the same envelope, they just put it in with their welcome letter. You're welcome, excuse me, to provide the entire procedural safeguards document within the 10 days of referral if you choose. We find that many people wait until that first visit, and that's okay as well. So a reminder that sending the brochure does not replace your responsibility to provide and review the complete Early On procedural safeguards, protecting families' rights document the first time that you meet with the family, either in person or virtually. At that time, the service coordinator should discuss the document fully with the family to ensure that they know their rights and the procedures in place to protect those rights. So this is an opportunity, Janet mentioned it earlier, to build trust and help the family understand that our system is designed to support them and their child. The procedural safeguards protecting families' right document should also be provided with prior written notice. So you need to have a link on there. And if the family cannot connect to that link, you should provide the document itself. But it needs to be provided with the prior written notice at the IFSP meetings when a parent requests the document. And with the receipt, if there is a state complaint or due process complaint filed, they also need to receive the family rights document. So I'm going to pause for a minute. Are there any questions so far about how to use the trifold and when to give the procedural safeguards document? Okay. So a hard copy of the early on procedural safeguards protecting families' rights document should be provided if the service coordinator, as well, if the service coordinator believes that it will support the family's understanding of their rights, and must be provided if requested by the family or if they are unable to access the document online. So we don't have a problem with using the link, but when you visit the family, when you're discussing family rights, that you're actually clicking on that link, hopefully using a device the family has, so you can ensure that they can look at it at any time. Otherwise, please do provide a hard copy. The document itself, the procedural safeguards for early on, provides several examples, explains several of the family's rights and procedural safeguards. Let's see, so the early on, we have them listed here. Leanne talked about the Early On Michigan Family Guidebook. I'm glad to hear that that's supportive in talking with families. It is family friendly, as we did try to make our procedural safeguards, but it is a legal document, so it's got some legalese in there. But that guidebook, your prior written notice, the parental consent and authorization to share also help in protecting families' rights. So you can take a look, obviously, in the brochure and in the guidebook and see all of the different rights that are explained. And in the procedural safeguards document, every service provider and coordinator should be very familiar with these. And I would recommend you consider bringing them out during teaming time if you have an opportunity, and maybe just chunk it and go through some different pieces within the family's rights, the procedural safeguards protecting families' rights document, or the guidebook. You know, you can kind of chunk little pieces of these different documents and really make sure everyone understands them well. So you can order the brochure or the guidebook, or download them as a PDF that you can send with an email at www.1800earlyon.org. To order the actual document, you would go to the Order Materials tab. And to download the document, you would go, when you get to the 1800earlyon.org site, you would look in Family Resources tab. Also in the 1800earlyon.org, the Family Resource tab is really a great place to send families to access any documents regarding their procedural safeguards and dispute resolutions. So now I'd like to turn it over to Mark to talk about early childhood special education, or excuse me, preschool special education. Mark.
Thanks, Laura. Well, the good news is, as Laura indicated, there's two separate procedural safeguards, and for children with IEPs, we would be using the Part B procedural safeguards. The four triggering events, shall we say, when you would pass these out are very similar. When a parent makes a request for initial evaluation, they would have them then. Annually, you'd want to pass those out as well. The thing that does not come up a great deal in preschool special education, but is a time that you would have to give them, is if there is a state complaint or disciplinary action. And then the last thing is if a parent requests them. So you can see how those mirror pretty much the same reasons that you would use these in early on. One of the things that you see on the page, actually, let me get to that page. The page in front of you is something that I think is a really valuable resource. The Office of Special Education worked with Michigan Alliance for Families, and they've come out with these Family Matters brochures that you can download as well, which does a really nice job of just explaining processes that are part of special education and really inviting families into the I think sometimes confusing steps that they must go through in order for their child to get the services that they need. So we often say, as we are doing training around the state, that inviting parents to the table is not the same as inviting them to the conversation or process. And I think this is the piece that helps them to be equal partners with us and helping to weigh in on all those things that a parent knows best on. And so I'd encourage you to take a look at these. And I'm not focusing so much on the legal requirements of it as those certainly are important, but just inviting parents into this conversation in a way that makes them feel like we understand what's going on and we know what the next steps to take. I think all of us have been in situations in the past where you think, I have no idea what's going on or what the next step is, and that puts us at an unequal footing. And so trying to give parents that equal footing so they can provide in a comfortable environment what they know is certainly going to be a benefit for all. So I know Victoria talked about that a little bit as well, and Michigan Alliance for Families is more than willing to help out with these conversations also. So just that focus on parents knowing their rights and being equal partners is certainly something that we want to champion all the time. So I'll turn that back over to Laura, I think it is at this point, to talk just a little bit further about
Victoria has her hand up too.
Oh, sorry.
To keep interrupting your guys' meeting, but I definitely want to say thank you, Mark, for mentioning that. Another thing is that all of us that work at Michigan Alliance for Families can empathize with these families because we all are parents of children with disabilities. So we've lived it firsthand. I can say for me, I was an uneducated parent when I first started going to Michigan Alliance for Families as a parent. And they really helped me realize my rights and my responsibilities and helped me become a state leader. And that's how I began working for the Alliance as well.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, great segue into our next slide, Victoria, and always a pleasure to work together. Here are some additional resources for families to understand their rights and procedural safeguards protecting those rights. And so the first link is to the section of the Essentials for Early On, that covers the procedural safeguards. This is one of the 5 modules that are required for all staff working with children birth to 3 with IFSPs. So if you ever want to just pull out the one module or the one module, you could always go through that again. If people have been with you for a very long time, you might want to pull it out. And again, at a team meeting, use that to support conversation. So with Victoria, one of the things I wanted to bring up is we do have the links here for Michigan Alliance for Families that are videos for early on and preschool special education. And the really nice things about these is that they're designed specifically to help families understand their rights. So there are links that you can give to families so that it's not just looking at a blank dot, at a piece of paper. It's a conversation, watching this video that might support them as well. So we recommend that you use these to further your understanding as well as share them with families. So next we'll turn it over to Janet for more information about dispute resolution. And as a reminder, both early on and preschool special education use this process for Part B, or we both use the Part B dispute resolution system. So Janet, if you want to take it from here.
Okay, thanks, Laura. As everyone's probably aware, there tends to be a lot of attention focused on the dispute resolution, the complaint process, the due process hearing process as part of procedural safeguards. But this is only one piece of all the rights that a parent has under procedural safeguards. But it is an important area because families and parents need to understand, if they're not in agreement, how can they resolve resolve the situation so that it's satisfactory for the family as as well as the school? How do they come to that mutual agreement? And as Laura said, we Part C has adopted Part B as our dispute resolution process. So the resources and the model forms that Office of Special Education has put out for the dispute resolution are the same documents that we use. We've been having lots of conversation with the Office of Special Education to make sure that Early On is reflected in those documents. So, just simple things like changing student to, including child instead of just student, but, just making sure they align. So this first document here on the left-hand side of this slide, the Special Education Dispute Resolution Options. This is on the Michigan Department of Education Office of Special Education website. This is an excellent document to look at all the different options a parent may have, and really trying to stress those options that are less political or less less tense. So you can have informal meetings, you can have facilitated meetings, you can go to mediation. Those are all free options through the Special Education Mediation Center. And as well as the state complaints and the due process complaints. But it really helps this document really helps to explain all those different, what those different options are and how a parent might proceed to those next steps. So we've also listed some options here that you can give to parents if they're looking for assistance. First thing they should do is reach out to the supervisor, reach out to the school district with their concerns. If they're not confident with that and they want some support or want some more information, they can go to Michigan Alliance for Families. As Victoria has already spoken about, they're well versed in the dispute resolution process, and they can help support the parents in advocating for themselves. Special education mediation, that's excellent service. They provide a bunch of options. They can help out with those informal meetings. They can help out with facilitated meetings, and they don't just have to be IFSP meetings. They can be just a discussion, but they're there to help, and it's a free service. Disability Rights Michigan, formerly known as Michigan Protection and Advocacy, they are also an option for parents. Parents can reach out to them for support if they're feeling like they're not being heard, or they just want another avenue for support. And then, of course, the Office of Special Education Information Helpline is always available for anyone, for a parent, for we have senators who use that helpline or that information line. So, if anyone has a question, they can call that, or they can email at the email address listed here on this slide. It's an excellent, another excellent resource. The Office of Special Education is set up to, if they don't know the answer immediately, they triage it to the appropriate person, or they do research so that they can answer the question. So another really good option there. Okay. So actually, we do measure dispute resolution in our state performance plan annual public reporting. With Early On, it's indicators 9 and 10. We have to report the number of resolution sessions and the number of mediations and how they concluded. Did they go to completion? Were they stopped? What happened with that? And the same, Preschool has indicator 15 and 16 that they have to report resolution sessions and mediation. And in the past years, especially for Early On, we've been reporting 0 on everything. This past year, we did have 2 mediations. One went to completion and one just dissolved. They never completed the mediation. And the question did come up in the chat, have we had any complaints? Well, this year, we have had our first Part C complaint that we've had in years and years. So that's an open complaint right now that's being investigated. And the way we approach that is it goes through the Office of Special Education. That's where the complaint was filed. They start the process because they have the process set up through Catamaran, but they're working with one of our consultants from our office so that they make sure they understand all the ins and outs of Part C. We've had another complaint come in that was the incident they're talking about happened prior to transition to Part B, but ended up in Part B because the way the situation rolled out. So it's being investigated as a Part B complaint right now, but it could, after the investigation, it could be bumped into Part C. That's just going through the process right now. So as we talk more about these processes and families are informed, we are starting to see, and in part of this is probably due to COVID, that we're seeing an uptick in the use of the mediation center and the complaint process because families, everybody's kind of disgruntled because of COVID. It was a very, very challenging year. It was difficult to get services out to folks because of, restrictions, and so we're just starting to see a little bit of this. We'll keep track of that and keep you informed of how this proceeds. Next slide. And then we just have a list of resources here. I do want to kind of give everyone a heads up. As we've been going through the general supervision monitoring of ISDs, we're noticing some of your forms, like on your prior written notice, or I don't know if it's on some of the consent forms, but some of the references that are listed there are outdated now. So like Michigan Protection and Advocacy is no longer Michigan Protection and Advocacy, it's Disability Rights Michigan. And some of the forms also still reference Michigan Office of Special Education and Early Intervention Services, which changed years ago. So you might want to take a look at your forms and make sure that you have the correct citations on those. And I also noticed with the family guidebook, we need to go back and make some changes too, because we don't have the mediation center. We do not have it listed correctly in the family guidebook. We still have it as MSUMP. So so we all need to do some updates. And just to let you know too, we are looking at our early on procedural safeguards, and we're going through it word for word with Part Bs to make sure we're aligned in that we have any changes, any differentiation that we need for early on from Part B, that's listed correctly, but that in general it aligns. So that's taking us a very long time because it takes a long time to do that kind of detailed comparison, but we hope to have that out before the fall. So thank you. I think that's it for me, and I turn it over to who's next? Who's me?
Jenny Kenishnik.
Jenny. Okay. All right.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jenny Kenishnik, the Public Awareness Coordinator for the Office of Innovative Projects, and I've got just a few updates. I know we're running short on time, so I'll try to go as quickly as I can. As part of the state systemic improvement plan, we've been disseminating 2 wheels to help support providers when working with families. Early intervention service providers have found the wheels to be an effective tool for having those difficult conversations with families about social emotional development. So here you will see there are 2 different wheels that have been designed to support those conversations with families. The first one is the MIAM Baby Stages wheel, and this is for use when discussing stages of social emotional development and as a resource for social emotional milestones. The second wheel, located below the 0 to 3 behavior has meaning wheels, is for use when families indicate a specific concern about behavior such as biting. We have a large quantity of these wheels in storage, and we've been thoughtful about how to disseminate them throughout the remainder of the year. So firstly, we will continue to reserve the wheels for the areas participating in the OSEP cohort work. And secondly, we will be opening orders to all early on coordinators in the near future. Our plan is to create an educational video to ensure folks know how to adequately use the wheels and are prepared for successful implementation. So this is just a little heads up that these will be available to you in the near future. So stay tuned as we continue to work on developing the video and plan for dissemination. Next slide. And as a reminder, our birth through 5 child find meeting is scheduled for April 27th, and registration is now live on our website. We encourage you again to invite all personnel involved in child find activities, and we're looking forward to coming together to learn from each other, hear updates about early on and build up in the branding of preschool special education. Next slide. And lastly, we wanted to make you aware of a new child find guidance that is now available for reviewing. The Office of Special Education has issued guidance supporting 3 to 26-year-olds, and the document can be found at the link listed below. Thanks, Jory.
Hi, I'm wondering if Carrie or Kelly can provide an update on the Persona project.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Christie. Hello, everyone. I'm Carrie Holmberg. I'm coordinator of the Early On Center for Higher Education, and we are super pleased to announce that our Michigan Persona project has launched our first set of our ebook, which includes 10 personas. 10 personas are short stories about a child and family, and each of the personas offers information about the unique composition of the family details and about the family's child, including the name, age, likes and dislikes, and also insights about who the child is as a learner. So the Michigan Personas are a new collection of stories that reflect the people and places of our state. And what's really neat is that faculty and instructors can use personas to help adult learners to individualize, to support each and every child and family. Coaches and mentors and supervisors such as yourself as leaders, you can also use personas to support inquiry, reflection, and professionalism and the adult learners that you support. These are available now on the earlyoncenter.org website. We're working on a crosswalk to national frameworks and our Michigan frameworks. And we will be also developing a part 2 of the ebook, another set. So look for that coming probably early summer. And then I will turn it over to Mr. Mark, who has some great information on the Michigan DEC pre-conference sessions.
Well, I'm not hearing Mark, but we're really excited that Michigan DEC will be featuring sessions today at noon. Dr. Tunette Powell will be speaking to us. She provided a presentation last night. And Mark, I don't know if you want to talk about Dr. Gilliam.
Sure. Sorry about that. I said some really good things while I was on mute, but yeah, Dr. Tunette Powell was last night, as Christy said, and please, if you have a chance today to listen to her, she has such a wonderful parent perspective that she brings to the conversation. She's now an advocate, but an advocate for systems change. So she's at 12 o'clock today, and we're actually giving you the link to get right on there. You can actually bypass registration. We think it's so important that you get onto it. And then Dr. Walter Gilliam, if you have not heard him speak in the past, please make every effort to listen to him either at this pre-conference session, which is co-sponsored through CEC, and that's on the 14th. It's free to people that are members. And then also we have Dr. Gilliam at our conference, and that is on the 29th of April. So the early discount ends on the 15th, so get registered before then. You can't possibly spend more than $60 to go to this. Everything's we try to keep the cost as low as possible, but the content is incredible. So register and join us on that day. We'd love to have you there. I'll turn it over to Jean.
All right, I know I'm right at time, but our Early On conference is going to be face-to-face this year. So we're so excited at the newly renovated Grand Traverse Resort. On November 15th is our pre-conference. We have amazing all day long sessions. Carrie Ebert, all these were based on your feedback from our virtual conference. We have Paul Elam, we have the pyramid model. We have Alyssa Hofste on the Prevent, Teach, Reinforce. Jim Henry's talking about secondary trauma. So amazing pre-conference sessions. And you know, the sessions itself, the call for proposals out, we know you and your staff have some amazing talent and things to share. So we would highly, Jory dropped it in the chat. If you can put in a request for proposal, you get a free conference attendance for doing that.
Jean,
decided-
Patrick is
Yep, sorry.
asking about, yeah, sorry, Jen. Patrick is asking about the room block, if we know when that'll be available.
It will not be available until we get the brochure out, guys. So we have full run of the hotel. So we won't have a problem with rooms. And the rooms, they honored our old price. So it's so reasonable. One of our cheapest conferences, but we'll update you on the listserv when that opens. We know May's a busy time. Mark, next slides. So our next combined call has been canceled. This is our last combined call for the program year. We're working with our office and trying to figure out what the best route is for next time, you know, frequency, how often, and things like that. So keep you posted. You can find all our recorded calls on the website, and Jory's dropping in the link. And oh God, I did 2 minutes, Christy, sorry.
Yeah, it wasn't all you, Jean. Thanks very much for joining us today, everybody. It was so great to connect with you. I hope you have a fabulous Friday and a great weekend. Visit our website for the recording. It'll be available for a while. Thank you.